welcome to a very special edition of EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our special guest, well known to many of our audience, is Abby Johnson, and she's the author of the book Unplanned, published by Ignatius Press. This edition, it's the latest edition coming out in 2019. It's reflective of the new movie as well. Welcome, Abby, to EWTN's Bookmark.
Thank you so much.
We're happy the movie is out and is doing as well as it's been doing. And for people who haven't seen it yet, obviously, check the papers, check online, and see where they can get an opportunity to not only see a wonderful film, but also to support the pro-life movement.
Sure, yeah.
Now, it's interesting, too, because I didn't get a chance to see the film yet at the time of this discussion, but John Paul, who's one of our friars, got to see the movie, and he was raving about it. And one of the points that he made to me, I talked to him yesterday, he said how much he thought the movie really reflected what was in the book. Is that what your thoughts were when you saw it?
Yes. I was pretty involved in the process of making sure that the film wasn't just inspired by a true story, but that it was indeed based on my story, and got final approval of the screenplay, which was important to me, to make sure that things weren't over dramatized or embellished. I mean, abortion's bad enough as it is, so if we just tell the truth, I think that's enough to really convince people of what's truly happening. Right.
Now, the book originally came out in 2010. There was an expanded edition, which this is in 2014 now. It's got, as you said, there's a new edition for 2019 that is in sync with the movie poster, right? So that's the latest edition, and certainly for people maybe who go and see the movie and want to know more about your story, they could obviously pick up the book, and we'd be happy to sell it to them through EWTN's religious catalog, of course. Now, in this particular, the expanded edition that you did, one of the things that was added in here that your Cindy Lampert, who worked on the book with you, noted that something happened on July 18th, 2013.
Yeah, we found out that the facility where I had worked and directed was closing, and closed its doors in 2013, and never saw another patient for an abortion after that. And that was certainly a day of victory, but also just I don't know, also a solemn day for me, just to remember what had happened inside of those clinic walls, and how many women had been harmed, how many children had been taken, and but to know that no more women would be harmed in that facility was certainly a great victory.
Now, in the beginning, in the forward here, that Father Frank Pavone, a priest for life, a good friend of the network over the years, mentions, you know, some of the names, Bernard Nathanson, people would know, Carol Everett over the years, who had been an abortionist, Tony Levantino, and now welcome Abby Johnson into their ranks. In some ways, you could say, is that really a rank you want to be associated with on one level because of what happened, but where you are and speaking out now? Do you feel like you've been asked to pick up that mantle?
I think so. I mean, actually the first book I read when I left Planned Parenthood was Dr. Nathanson's Hand of God. And I remember reading his words and just really being struck by the work that he did in this movement and the pro-life movement, and just thinking, I hope that God will use my past for his glory, like he's done in Dr. Nathanson's life. And so that's really always been the prayer. And when Dr. Nathanson passed, certainly there was a feeling that, you know, okay, now it's really time to sort of pass that baton and really take over what he had done for so many years, to expose what's taking place, and not only to expose, but to also attempt to bring healing to those who have been touched by abortion.
Right. Now, in the beginning of this edition of the book, you say, my story's not a comfortable one to read. I think it's only fair to warn you of that up front. Not comfortable, but honest and true. So it was important that this be, as you said about the movie itself, the adaptation, you wanted it to be truthful.
Yeah, and that same line is in the film. You know, we want people to know that this film may make you squirm a little bit, the book may make you squirm a little bit, but it is the truth. And like I said before, you know, what is told about the abortion industry is so shocking to so many. And, you know, we wanted to be upfront. This is a story about hope and redemption and God's mercy, but it's also really raw and really gritty and really exposes that truth.
Right. Now, there's a question at the beginning. Were you really so gullible? Were you really so inconsistent between your values and your actions? Were you really so ambivalent, so naive, so foolish? You get the picture. My answer, yes, I've always been asked, were you, pro-choice workers, really driven by compassion and tenderness, by motives of truly helping women and making the world a better place? And you said yes.
Yeah, it's true. You know, I got involved with Planned Parenthood as a college student, very naive, very ignorant to either side of this debate, but really believing that what Planned Parenthood was selling was good, and that it was helping women, and that we were presenting compassion and a compassionate message to women who were in crisis. I don't think anybody goes to work for the abortion industry saying, you know, I'm really excited about performing abortions. I mean, the goal is to help, and it's compassion, but it's definitely misguided.
Yeah, Mother Angelica used to always talk about misguided compassion, false compassion. People, you say this, and I thought it was interesting, saying, I found right and good and wisdom on both sides. I found foolishness and treachery and deception on both sides as well. I've experienced how good intentions can be warped into poor choices no matter what the sides. So not only were there people who thought they were doing good things, who maybe were misguided, there might have been people even on the pro-life side who you found maybe weren't as honest and upfront as they appeared to be.
You know, evil works in all movements, and I think it's important for us to be aware of that, be cognizant of that, and I think it's important for us to recognize that, in particular, I think in the pro-life movement, Satan is really trying to get a hold of this movement, because at the helm of our ship is Jesus Christ. And so Satan is trying to come in and cause division and disunity. And unfortunately, sometimes we can fall prey to that. And so, you know, we have to really put on the armor of God and protect ourselves from that, because we can fall victim.
Well, I know years ago they used to talk about, you want to see a bunch of disagreement, get a bunch of pro-life leaders sitting around a round table, having a discussion. And again, that kind of, sometimes we have to, I think in terms of servant leaderships and saying, maybe I need to step back so that the movement can move forward. And a lot of us believe that we've been given a vision, and then sometimes it becomes my way or the highway. You say, even more shocking, we have far more in common with the other side than we might imagine.
Yeah, I think that's true. I work with a lot of legislators, and on both sides of this issue. And I remember one time I went into, nobody in the pro-life movement would go and talk to this guy, this legislator. He's in Texas, he's called Senator Planned Parenthood. And nobody would touch him. Nobody would go talk to him. And I finally said, well, that's ridiculous. I'm gonna go talk to him. And so I did. And he said, I remember him looking at me and saying, Abby, I just don't know what we have in common. I just don't see what we have in common. And I said, well, Senator, don't you think that we both truly want what's best for women? I mean, we may have different ideas of what that is, but don't you think that you want the best for women and I want the best for women? And he said, yeah, I guess that's true. And so we developed a dialogue. Then, to everyone's surprise, we were able to work with him on a bill to protect mothers who had conceived from sexual assault. And so I think there are issues that we can work together on. And how do we draw someone into the love of Christ? Not by ostracizing them and saying, I want nothing to do with you. I have nothing in common with you. Go away, right? Stay away from me. But we have to bring them into that loving truth and that charitable truth and really have conversation and dialogue with them.
Now you say, I was loved from one side onto the other side. How so?
Yeah. You know, there were people that stood outside of my clinic the entire 8 years that I worked at Planned Parenthood. And there were certainly two different camps, those who called us murderers and baby killers and yelled at us. And then there was, you know, the other group that was consistently there all 8 years that told us that they were praying for us, that they cared about us, that they would help us if we ever wanted to leave. And, you know, when I saw what I did during the abortion and decided to leave, it would have been very easy for me just to walk away and say, I'm going to get another job, and I'm done. I'm done with the pro-choice, pro-life debate. I'm finished with it. But because of the love and kindness that I had been shown by the people on the sidewalk, on the other side of this literal fence, it caused me to want to know them.
Okay.
I wanted to know how they could possibly love me after those 8 years and do it persistently and reach out to me. There had to be times of frustration for them, but they continued to reach out and love. And I wanted to know what that was about.
Yeah, what was
how could they do
the underpinning
that?
of that?
Yeah,
right, exactly.
yeah.
Now you said, while describing the events in this book, I relied not only on my memory, my personal correspondence, interviews with others involved. Now the book's been out about 9 years now. Have you had anybody challenge your recounting of any of these events over the years?
No, not really. In fact, I have had several people from the affiliate, the Planned Parenthood affiliate where I worked, leave the clinic and come through our ministry for clinic workers, and they have all corroborated what I have said about my experiences inside of the facility.
Now you were at Texas A&M, a fairly conservative school. You ended up going to some particular event and being introduced kind of to Planned Parenthood. When you were in college, did you know any girls or any of your friends or anybody you knew who had had an abortion or something where it might have touched your life prior to going to work there?
Well, I myself had had an abortion.
That's right, okay.
Prior to working there, I got pregnant in college, went to my boyfriend at the time, told him I was pregnant. He said, no problem, I'll take you to a clinic. I've taken other girls there before. And I would love to say that I thought about other options, but I didn't. He was 8 years older than me. I thought, well, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. I trusted him. And I went to go, I had this abortion. I came back to school, and I sort of closed it off in a box, pretended it didn't happen, still considered myself, I mean, really a pro-life person, even though I myself had had an abortion. I don't know, the mental disconnect is hard to understand.
How many weeks were you along, do you know? When
I don't remember.
Okay, because the one that you saw and you recount vividly in here was 13 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Now you had done some sonograms before, but
Sure.
not as part of an abortion. Why did they
Right.
pull you in to do this particular one?
Well, we had a visiting physician come in from out of town, and he was explaining that at his own private practice abortion facility, he only used ultrasound guidance during the abortion procedure, and that was not standard protocol for us in Planned Parenthood. Our protocol at Planned Parenthood was to perform the abortion without the use of an ultrasound. So ultimately, you're performing it in a blind manner. The doctor's just sort of poking around in there, and it was no wonder. I started thinking about it. I thought it was no wonder that we have such a high rate of uterine perforation or hemorrhage. These problems because the doctor cannot see what he's doing during the abortion procedure. So this doctor decided that he was going to demonstrate what using an ultrasound looked like. And so because of that, he needed an extra set of hands. And because I was the director, I was called in to assist.
Right. Now, you relate to the fact of how it impacted you, the situation, and also, in a sense, in contrast to the non-impact, at least, it had on the doctor and the nurse.
Yeah. Not impacted at all. I mean, the doctor, I don't even know how many abortions over his lifetime that he performed. I mean, tens of thousands. This doctor in particular believed that infanticide should be legal through 24 months after birth.
2 years after?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
And I remember asking him one time, well, why 24 months? Why not
what's the cutoff?
24 and a half, right? And he said, well, you have to stop somewhere.
Okay.
And so, these were people who, death, destruction, it was not something that pricked their conscience.
So they had to, in a sense, many people would go through, they build a shell to kind of protect themselves from dealing with. Let's talk about the fact that this great book is coming out, and it is out now as a movie under the title Unplanned. Now, the movie's been in the works for how long?
Over 5 years.
Okay. So 5 years. Did it really take that long for this movie to get made, and if so, why?
So we signed the deal over 5 years ago, and we were all ready to go, ready to start writing the screenplay. And the directors, these two very faithful Catholic men, they heard a word from the Lord that told them to wait. And we were all very frustrated because we didn't want to wait. And they did. They went on to do, because these were the writers and directors for God's Not Dead 1, 2, and 3. So they went on to do God's Not Dead 2 and 3 in that time when they were waiting. After the 2016 election, they then heard from the Lord again, and he said, now is the time. So there was about a 3-year break there where they were doing other projects, and we were just sort of waiting. And once they got the green light from the Lord, things went very quickly. So screenplay was written. I approved it. They went immediately into casting. They filmed for about 8 weeks in Oklahoma. Stillwater, Oklahoma. Yeah, and then it's been in production and came out March 29th.
Right, so actually about 2 years from the time they kind of got that go-ahead. Now, you said when you first read the script, what was your reaction to it?
Well, initially I thought, man, I hate my character. But I realized it was very accurate. They had just pulled it from the book. But I remember feeling like, oh, this feels very vulnerable. It's how I felt when I first saw the film, just very vulnerable. But constantly reminding myself that this is not about me, or it's not about pushing Abby Johnson into into orbit with the media. This is really about telling God's story and the amazing power of his redemption.
So why was the working title originally called Redeemed?
Yeah, so they were worried that if it got out that they were filming Unplanned, because that title is pretty well known in pro-life and pro-choice circles, that there would be protests. There would be people show up and interfere with our filming, and a lot of the filming, because it was a lot of it was done on a sidewalk, so a lot of it was outdoors
where they could have interfered.
Where they could have really interfered.
Right.
So.
Okay. And also just the idea of pressure that can be put. There's some other movies which have had this, where people, when they found out what the focus was, either got off the film, either because they had their own personal problems with the film being made that might be pro-life, or their concerns that their career might be damaged.
Well, one of the things that we were very clear with the crew and the cast on was that this was unplanned. So we filmed under Redeemed, but everybody knew what the story was. They knew what the topic was, and everybody, whether it was a camera guy, the guy running the boom mic, no matter who it was, they all had to be pro-life. That was the first question that we asked, because we did not want anybody saying, well, if I would have known it was a pro-life film, I wouldn't have worked on it. Right. We wanted everybody to be invested, and the directors had very honest conversations with all of the cast, letting them know that you could be persona non grata to Hollywood after this. But they were all really excited and eager to still be a part of this film. Right.
Now it got an R rating, and what's your reaction? We've heard people say, well, it's good because it shows it's tough. Others say, well, they're trying to do this to keep young people out. In fact, I know Ken Rather, who's the VP of distribution for PureFlix, said a 15-year-old girl can get an abortion without a parent's permission, but you can't see this movie without adult supervision. What's your thought about it?
Yeah, I don't think that irony is lost on anyone. But it was a little surprising at first, but when you look at Hollywood and sort of the agenda that's there, not too surprising. I mean, we do think that there was definitely a political agenda to push an R rating for the film to prevent young people from seeing Unplanned. But we were not willing to compromise on any of the content. We weren't willing to pull anything to, get a PG-13 rating. And I've told people, look.
Was that offered to you? I mean, when they do the rating and they hit you an R and say, well, it's an R for this, do they go back and say, well, if you cut this or that out, you can get a? So do you think they were trying to leverage you?
I think so. Okay. Yeah. If you don't show the baby dying by abortion, then we'll bring it back to a PG-13. And I tell people, look, we have cable TV, and I've told parents, if your children watch cable TV, they have seen worse things on cable than they have in Unplanned. Right. But it's just, I think it was an attempt to try to keep this away from young people who are really the people that need to see what's happening during an abortion.
Well, it's interesting too, because and I'm sure it's reflected in the movie itself, you talk about the idea that when you were first working as one of those people who bring people from the car, the escort, the escorts going back and forth, how you kind of questioned the idea of saying, if we're all about truth and helping women, why are we afraid of them talking to the people who are protesting?
Right. Yeah, I remember wondering that, like, if we're pro-choice, then why do we care if a woman goes to the fence, has a conversation with someone, and makes a different choice? It wasn't until later on that I was made aware of this abortion quota, that we had a certain number of abortions that we had to sell. And then it all sort of made sense. We're trying to sell a product here. So if they go to the fence and they choose adoption or they choose to parent, that's impacting our quota.
You're right, the bottom line there. In the book, there's a line, the power of secret. Never trust a decision you don't want your mother to know about.
Also in the movie. Yeah. I actually worked for Planned Parenthood for 1.5 years before I told my parents. Right. I knew that they were pro-life. I knew where they stood. I knew that they would not be happy about me working at Planned Parenthood.
Were they aware you had an abortion?
No.
Okay.
No.
When did they learn about that?
Right before the book came out.
Really?
We were I was debating whether or not I wanted to put it in the book, Unplanned. And so we sort of had two different versions, where we talked about the abortion, then when we didn't.
This is the R-rated or the PG-13
yeah, that's
version?
right, that's right. And I feel like most of our stories are R-rated until Christ comes in, right? So I didn't know what to do, and I had wanted to tell my parents in person that I had these 2 abortions. It just never happened, and the publisher called me and they said, Abby, it's D-Day. We have to know what's going to go to print. Mm-hmm. And so I called my mom, and I said, I need to tell you something. And I told her, and she said, well, Abby, she said, I'm glad you told me. And she said, but I'm not surprised. Right. She said, I thought that there had to be something that was keeping you there, that was driving your passion for working there. And she said, and I said, well, this impacts our family. So my grandma's going to read about this. I need to know, your people, your friends at church are going to know that your daughter had 2 abortions. I need to know, are you okay? Because if you're not, I won't talk about it. And she said, Abby, it would be dishonest for you not to. This is your story. This is part of your story, and you have to put that out there. Right.
So a team effort, Unplanned. Abby Johnson, thank you so much for being brave and telling your story. And we invite everybody to plan on picking up Unplanned, as well as going to see the movie any which way you can, whether it's in the movies or ultimately on OTT or purchasing a DVD. Abby Johnson, Unplanned, Ignatius Press publisher, and available through the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com, a must read. Join us next time right here on Bookmark. Thanks.